Hi, I'm Paul Gerard. My old friend Dave Heyman, who lives in New Zealand, asked me to offer a talk to your group based on a paper I wrote, I think early last year, maybe the tail end of the year before. And I'm going to do that, but he also asked me to do like an introductory kind of video to kind of, the idea was partly to introduce myself, but really to challenge you guys and just sort of make you think about a few things that are of interest. And what Dave did is he sent me some ideas for things to say, 6 or 7 bullet points. I've actually just used them, and I'm just going to make some noises associated with each of these kind of topics as a kind of a warm-up and a bit of fun. Okay, so it's not too serious, I don't think, until the end perhaps. And I'm also going to be challenged by him, so you'll see what I mean in a minute. And I'm going to respond, let's say, vigorously. So how I know Dave? Well, Dave, I met Dave, I think it must have been in the late 90s, but certainly by the early 2000s. He was working with the company I was associated with at the time as an associate with us, I think for a bank, although I can't really remember the detail of that project. But we got on very well, and we had a good laugh together. We co-wrote and co-presented a 5-day e-business testing class, when the web was just kind of getting going. The dot-com era had just kind of fizzled out, and people were being a lot more sensible. And I think that was the only class of its size, certainly its length, its duration, in the world at the time. Dave also took some of the material that I'd written for ISEB, which is the UK kind of chapter, if you like, of the BCS that deals with certification. That was a long time ago. We also tried to win a testing improvement project with a large bank in the north of England, and we both lived in the south at the time. I think between us we drove about, I seem to remember, something approaching 1,000 miles to try and win this piece of work. And we did a lot of kind of legwork on the basis of it. Interestingly, what happened was there was another guy, another quite a well-known consultant at the time, who'd written a book on process improvement, and they took him on and his company to do the process improvement, and we were left out in the cold and a little bit miffed. Anyway, I met someone who worked for the bank at the time, I think 2 or maybe 3 years later, and what was kind of interesting was this guy said the bank spent I think over £1 million making the changes, and over the course of the 2 years after the project had come to an end, they went back to doing things the old way. So much for that. Anyway, so this is the first thing Dave sent me as an idea for something to talk about briefly. The importance of keeping up to date with trends and thinking. Well, my kind of role in life is not really to hark back all the time and talk about stuff that is well understood and kind of static and stable. And I don't do the certification game anymore. Not for a long time, many years now. And really the pitch I would give you in terms of sort of staying up to date with things is this rather simple idea from a rather complicated person, Albert Einstein, who said, once you stop learning, you start dying. I absolutely support that. I think that's how it works. If you stop learning, you're brain dead. You might as well just call it a day and just walk away from projects, that's for sure. Because projects are unique. Every project is a unique opportunity to learn some new stuff and potentially to relearn some old stuff, maybe rethink some of the old stuff that you already know. Projects being unique, you can't treat them with like a cookie cutter approach or a template, template your way through test strategies. You can't reuse the same text you used on the last project again and again and again. And if you really do think that you can work in a similar way on every project, even though they are unique, I think you need to be looking at a different kind of career. So absolutely, you've got to pay attention to your learning as you progress through your career. And I don't care whether you're happy being a tester and you have no ambition to be a manager or consultant or anything like that, or whether you're a manager and you found your level and you're comfortable. You never stop learning. Never stop learning. Now, the next point Dave mentioned was this idea of looking at change as a positive, and it's kind of so tightly coupled with this concept of learning in that every project is an opportunity to change. Projects leave the world in a different place. They might have a start, a muddle, and an end, but after the project, the world is a different place. That's what projects do. They change something in the world, which is a really positive thing. Now, not all projects succeed, of course, but change is part of this notion of working in projects, and you should regard change as inevitable and you should embrace it in the agile way. And a couple of quotes I want to throw at you. Without change, there's no innovation, creativity, incentive for improvement. It's very true. I mean, if you look at it from the perspective of businesses, they have to evolve to survive, to progress, to win more business, to grow, whatever their business goal is. And projects are a means of doing that. Projects help companies to launch new products, move into new businesses, to save money, to collect more money, whatever. All these things are about positive progress, making progress within the business world, if you like. And software is part of that, really critical part of that. Now, one of the things that I get asked to do every now and then is to make predictions about the future. And like the obvious thing is not to try and speculate what the future's about. It's about creating your own future. So you might not know what you're going to be doing in 5 years. It's in your hands as to where you go in your life and what direction you take. But the best way to predict what you're going to do in a few years' time is to just do it, to create it, to set a goal and go for it. Now, if change is really important, how are your skill sets going to change? Well, the skill sets might include, technologies and tools and that stuff, but also the way you behave, the way you operate, the processes you use, and certainly the way you think in how you make progress in your projects. Now, I don't think of it so much as a changing skill set. I think there's just a change in emphasis. So there's not many skills that you think, I don't need that skill anymore, I can just forget it. These things happen occasionally, but historically what happened is there were 3 areas: technical skills, domain knowledge, and testing skills that you need to be kind of quite hot at to be a productive professional tester in the community. The technical skills relate to partly the system under test. If there's a technological aspect, you need to kind of understand how to plan and run and execute and understand and interpret tests, of course. But also the tools you use to create data, to manage testing, to execute tests if you're into automation. The second area obviously is domain knowledge, and if whatever the business domain for your software is that you're testing, it always helps to know a little bit more about what the context of that product is going to be. How is it going to be used, who's going to use it, what are the behaviours that maybe I should be taking a closer look at when I'm trying to figure out how to test something. And the third area are what you might call the testing skills, how to think like a tester, to understand how you can interpret a requirement, to look at a behaviour in software and figure out how to create, run and understand tests. So certification was all we had 20 years ago. The world's moved on since then, although certification is still very important to some people, a lot of people obviously. I think testing skills is a kind of, we're still trying to understand what testing skills are. And I might talk about this in the full talk that you're going to see shortly, I think. But to me, there's 2 things that seem to be changing. So the things that you should be keeping an eye on in the next, in the next year to 3 years, say, is a lot of testers now are not working in big teams. They're working as individuals in smaller teams, in agile teams, dare I say. And if you're the only tester in the team, you are the test lead. So you have to take a leadership role. Now, it's not you're going to be bossing people around and planning huge budgets and monitoring progress through projects, and using a Microsoft project or something. I don't mean that. But when people have a problem in test, you're the person that they will come to. So you have to have a kind of partly a leadership role, but you also have to understand what test strategy is, what testing actually means to a program and project, and what testing delivers to our testing stakeholders, the customers in general and other people in the project team. You have to understand what testing does for that project. And so you are a consultant internally to the team. You have to advise, cajole, persuade, certainly communicate a lot of the time. So these personal, professional skills are really critical. The only piece of marketing I'll do today is I have a 3-day online class on leadership in test. If you're interested, very happy to give you guys a discount. I'll share it with Dave, and if you're interested, contact Dave, let him deal with that. Give him something to do. Now, Dave also asked me, are face-to-face conferences dead as a concept? Well, there was concern, I'm sure, from the companies who were running conferences, but I actually went to a live conference last week in Belgrade, Serbia. My old friend Mitko, who runs he's the chair of the ISTQB in the Southeast Europe region. An interesting show. There were 200 people there. Some people wore masks, some people didn't. The audience, by and large, were kind of a younger kind of group, I think, probably mostly under 30. I could say kids nowadays, but it was kind of a well-run show, and it ran as normal as it could possibly be run. We all had to take certain precautions, of course, but it went off okay. So I think the short answer is the conference game is changed because of COVID. However, I think some conferences will come back as they were pre-COVID. Other conferences will fade away. There'll be some hybrid conferences, and there'll be purely online conferences, which is kind of what most conferences are right now. So I think there'll be a bit of a reshuffling exercise, but the conference world will never be the same. Online is here to stay for a lot of people. Working from home is here to stay for a lot of people, but obviously not everybody. It's the same thing. So why you love it, New Zealand? I'm not sure whether this is a question to me or whether I was to ask you guys a question, but I'm not going to get feedback immediately, so it's a hard question to ask and kind of explore. I guess it's something to do with sheep, but then again, let's move on. Why the All Blacks are the best team, not just rugby, in the world. Really, do we have to talk about this? I mean, I'm an English rugby fan. I mean, come on, give me a break. I mean, it's kind of easy to respond to that because the year before last in the World Cup, Eddie Jones said they're the best team ever, but we can beat them. And I won't dwell on it, or I could show you a replay of the semi-final where England won 19-7. Or maybe not, okay? So don't give me all this, the All Blacks are the best at everything all the time ever. Fantastic team, of course. Next, why New Zealand athletes mainly only win Olympic medals in sitting down events, cycling and rowing. Oh, come on, the Brits are much better at this, okay? So the charge the Australians put to us, 10 years or so ago, when the London Olympics were coming up in 2012, is like, the Brits only ever win things sat down. And they are absolutely right. The vast majority of the medals we won, which was a huge number, it was a fantastic year for this country. We won Olympic golds in cycling, rowing, on horseback, sailing, canoeing, all sitting down events. I mean, just crazy. It's just coincidence. I don't know how that works. More interesting to me is kind of the medal table, and New Zealand did fantastically well this year in the 2020 Olympics, postponed in Tokyo. 20 medals, 7 golds, and a population of 5 million. A fantastic performance. Not the biggest country in the world, clearly, but a real big hitter, punching above your weight. However, there's another region that I want to mention who won 19 medals, 7 golds, population a bit bigger, area much smaller, blah, 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 which is Northwest England. If Northwest England had competed, I have to say, we'd have come 14th in the medal table, right behind New Zealand. So this national exceptionalism, you have to be a little bit careful about it. There's always someone who's just so snapping at your heels. And if Northwest England were a country, we'd have done pretty well, and maybe as well as New Zealand. So I don't want to dwell on this, except to focus on one small point at the end. And after having said hello and having a bit of a banter with you, I'm treating it as a bit of banter. I'm not trying to put you down, as you obviously would and I would hope you would realise. I just want to focus on a statistic, which is the number of deaths from COVID in New Zealand. 27 since last March, last March. Just incredible. I mean, how this has been achieved, I don't know. Well, I do know it's about good behaviour and taking it very, very seriously. Compare that with the UK deaths, which is 137,000 from March last year. The numbers for comparison on the right are actually the number of war dead in the Second World War. So in the UK, we've basically had as many as 30% of the number of deaths, I should say, from the Second World War. Very, very poor performance. A tragedy which will taint certainly this government, who in the UK government, that I have a very low opinion of, I have to say. In the meantime, keep being a fantastic example to the world. Go New Zealand, and I'll speak to you shortly.